The slush pile didn't disappear, it just moved. It used to sit on the transoms of New York publishers, towering stacks of manila envelopes and query letters that editors had to wade through to find the occasional gem. That diamond in the rough that they would pluck from obscurity into publishing acclaim. Now that slush pile lives in an online catalog at a retailer near you. Amazon alone adds thousands of new titles every single day. And that's just one retailer. When you factor in Kobo, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Google Play, and the countless library and subscription platforms, we're talking about millions of books competing for reader attention. The gatekeepers didn't vanish. They moved from New York offices to homes around the world. Readers became the gatekeepers. But they're not the only gatekeepers. You see, the gatekeepers have also multiplied because in addition to the readers themselves, there are new ones too. And they're much harder to navigate than traditional publishing ever was. These gatekeepers are things like algorithms, also bought carousels, category rankings, and the ever-shifting sands of discoverability.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 449 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is an additional bonus episode. This is the myth of self-publish it and they will come. This is part two of what meant to be, I wanted to write a single long article, and I realized it was going to be two single long articles over on Substack, and they've gotten some good response, and I wanted to share them with you. Now, I did this because I ran out of time to edit, and believe it or not, doing something like this it still takes time, but it didn't take as many hours as it does to edit an episode. So I thought I'd throw both of them in there for you. And that is coming up later, so there will not be, like in episode 448, there will not be a post-main content reflection because the entire piece is reflection, but there will be comments and a personal update, and there will be a ad read. And so without further ado, let's get into the ad read about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by the 7 P's of Publishing Success. It was the very first book I put together shortly after leaving Kobo. Now, interesting story. I was planning on putting together a book called Indie Publishing Insider Secrets, and I still have the cover designed and everything for it. And that ended up being 2 different books. It ended up being, well, actually 3 different books technically. It ended up being the 7 P's of Publishing Success, which is tracking, the patterns I recognized in publishing, and I really like that idea. It also became Killing It on Kobo, and then Writer's Guide to Working with Bookstores and Libraries, or libraries and bookstores. And it was interesting that I had the idea to do this big book. And again, here's the reminder or reflection is it's kind of like, I'm going to write the great American novel and then dividing it into more digestible chunks. And it really helped me because I had not self-published a nonfiction book like that before. Okay, I did. In the early days, I slapped something together very quickly to throw into KDP Select the day they announced it. Basically, a collection of essays I had published publicly already. So anyways, that was the first nonfiction book I was doing in my new Stark Publishing Solutions imprint under Stark Publishing. But I still think the 7 P's of Publishing Success are worthwhile because I'm still leveraging them. All these years later, I'm still using them to help writers see and understand. And that's why I want to give that away to you for free. It's available in ebook form. It's also available in audiobook form, so you can listen to it. And the link to that book is in the show notes here at starkreflections.ca, because I'll be honest with you, I do not have an easy, I hadn't created a human-readable link for it, but it's through the awesome folks at BookFunnel, and I wanted to give it to you for free because I think it's a good book, and I think it should be out there, and I think it's something to consider, because I'm still reflecting on it, and I'm still learning from focusing on those 7 Ps. And anyways, a good part of this episode and the previous one are really about that. So I wanted to not try to sell you anything. I just wanted to give you something, maybe partially to say thanks for listening. Wanted to give you something because you give me so much by listening. But again, that will be at starkreflections.ca, and you'll find the link in episode 449 as well as the previous one, 448. Thanks for listening. Let's roll the bumper and let's get into comments. Okay, so I'm trying to stay caught up on comments from recent episodes. So over at starkreflections.ca for episode 445, Overcoming the Self-Sabotage from Buried Trauma with Andrea Torre Balsara, Don King says, "Hi Mark, such an impactful episode all the way around. Beyond getting a lot out of the interview, I wanted to share 2 tiny comments. I get a lot of pleasure out of making someone else's day better. For instance, I make it a personal mission when I go through a checkout line with a sales clerk who seems to be having a bad day or hating their job to have them smile a little before leaving. I don't engage in that toxic, hey, why not smile stuff, because I don't know what they're dealing with. Someone close to them may have died, but just by smiling, making eye contact, joking a little bit, etc., I frequently will leave them in a better frame of mind, and that makes my own day better. Also, people connected to me on social media know that I love a pun or a dad joke. Some would say I am a dad joke, but that's another episode. And so I have taken great pleasure in sharing links to your new book, and I'm looking forward to reading through it. I plan to use it to make my own day better, just opening it at random and getting a needed chuckle. Thank you." Well, Don, thank you so much for that comment. I love the idea of the pleasure, the intrinsic pleasure that we get out of making someone else's day better. I love that you do that. Yeah, I try to do a similar thing, just to even smile. Just randomly smile at people just for no reason other than maybe seeing someone smile. Maybe that's a small, powerful, a small lift in their day. It doesn't cost me anything to be kind. It doesn't cost me anything to be silly and funny. And again, to let someone smile. And Don, you made me smile by sharing that about the dad joke. And thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. And I hope it does bring a smile to your day. That whole book, the reason I wrote it was me wanting to do that for people, wanting to help them smile. And that's what I'm hoping the book does. And just in some in-person events I've done recently, the people who are buying it are usually buying it because they want to give it to someone who loves making other people smile and telling them cheesy, corny puns and jokes, or just someone who could, it'd be fun, like you said. And that's, open it up and read a joke. And people were doing that, like they're picking up the book and going, oh, this is this one, and telling each other. And I love that. Even if they don't buy the book, it doesn't matter. I just made someone smile. So Don, thank you for that powerful reminder. And Don, I heard your recent interview. I think it was on the Creative Pen. Was it on the Creative Pen? Was it somewhere else? I can't remember. But I am looking forward to sharing the interview we did recently in a forthcoming episode as well. So thanks so much for that. And for episode 447, The Future of Hybrid Publishing with J.D. Barker, Edwin Downward commented over at starkreflections.ca. Edwin said, I had a draw. He said, I had Mark's tongue tied in, tongue tied. Let me start that again. Edwin said, I had a jaw-dropping moment when JD talked about ignoring what everyone else was doing for marketing and instead looking at all the things no one else was doing. That he came up with a night in a real haunted house prize for a haunting story strikes me as genius. Now I have a corner of my brain frozen in loop mode over whether I can come up with anything similar to give my own stories a boost. And thank you, Edwin. I didn't reflect on that, but whoa, genius, absolute genius. And here's the thing, is there probably is something related to the books that you've written that could be used in a similar way, right? So JD's thing was about a haunted house. Now, I know, Edwin, you write science fiction, so potentially you can't send someone in a spaceship, or you can't send someone on some intergalactic adventure, but there potentially could be something connected. Like, I don't know, I'm even thinking like, hey, I don't even know if they make proper space Lego like they used to when I was a kid, but, win the space Lego so you can make your own ship. Or I don't know, or replicate the ship from above. I don't know. But anyways, the cool thing is about this is, as creative people, as storytellers, when we think about the marketing, I just want to, and I shared this in I think a comment somewhere online in the last week. I think it was, I want to say, was it? Oh my God, Diana Wick. I think I interviewed her back in 2021. And I'll never forget her reminding me and listeners that marketing is just storytelling, really, when it comes down to it. And so putting your storyteller hat on can potentially be a way to get there. But thank you, Edwin, for that comment and reminding me of that genius from J.D. Barker from episode 447. I love the comments you guys share. I love learning from you with what you're reflecting on when you're listening to these episodes. And you can leave comments over at starkreflections.ca, on YouTube, Spotify. I am going to do my best to try to keep an eye on them so I can share your comments with other reflective listeners. All right, let's roll the bumper and do a brief personal update. Okay, for personal update, I have been a writing machine lately, and I love when I'm in this realm. I feel the happiest when I'm creating, and I owe it to the procrastination where I actually had to go, about over my head in terms of the hours that I was spending on the evenings and early mornings and weekends trying to get that book turned into a traditional publisher on December 1st, because I got so used to being on that treadmill that I missed it. And so after turning the book in, I jumped on another project that I had on the back burner for a while, the Once Bitten, which is an origin story from my Canadian Werewolf series. The actual, it's the actual event where he gets bitten by the wolf on his way to New York, and then he first learns how to deal with it, like the first time he turns into a wolf and what it's like, and how he comes to terms with this new life, this new dual life that he has to lead. Because the series kind of kicks off 12 years later, when he's already in this life, and he only alludes to it briefly. So I'd started what I thought would be a short story in the universe called Once Bitten. I thought, okay, cool, this will be fun. And as I was digging into it, now I'd already had, I think, about 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 words written, and maybe a couple other thousand words of notes of where I wanted to go with it. I thought it would be about 10,000 words. I'm now at 35,000 words, and I'm sort of done the first draft of it. Sort of, I think it is. But now I'm recognizing, it's a novella length. What do I do with this? And I'm actually looking at, this has been an interesting revelation. So my friend Julie and I, we've been doing writing sprints regularly for the last month and a bit, and it's been great. Because even though I'm doing the early morning writing, at 10 a.m. Eastern from 10 to 11, we do 2 20-minute sprints in that hour period. Because there's also chat, writerly chat and catching up and stuff like that. But she'd suggested, well, why don't you do, similar to what we did with Lover's Moon, it's a backstory. Like Lover's Moon, which is the fifth book in the series? Fifth book in the series. Sorry, is a backstory where what's happening in modern days, modern time, 2016, 2017, flashes back to their when they first met, and it's sandwiched between the prologue and the epilogue, which are modern or now. And she said, well, why don't you do something like that? And I was like, that would just be too hard. And then I realized and this is kind of an interesting thing, is I realized that at the end of Only Monsters in the Building, Michael's created this really intimate, deep friendship with somebody. They found a lot of commonalities, and he's learned something about his past that's going to drive him to go back to Canada, back home, so he can dig into his past and get to the bottom of things, to better understand himself. And that's going to be A Canadian Werewolf in London, Ontario. Because the title just jumped out at me and I thought I had to do this. But then I realized this is him returning to Canada for the very first time since 2003, when he first got to New York and got bit by a wolf on the way there, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, this is the perfect time. As he's preparing to go back to Canada, he's thinking a lot about the last time he was in Canada, which is the first time he came to the U.S. To move there. And so it works perfectly that as Michael and Ellie are traveling together back to New York before they prepare to go to Canada, he's going to be thinking about that, and therefore it's the perfect time to introduce this origin story in Once Bitten. And it also provides, it will become book 8, which is a novella, and book 2 is a novella, Stowaway. And then I can kind of establish that getting on to book 9, where Michael goes back home to Canada to uncover some mysterious events from his past. And it all kind of fell together. And part of the reason how it fell together is I've lived in this world, and I think I've mentioned before that I'm a method writer. I have to be right in the book, in the heart of it, in the thick of things, in order to understand where it's going to go. I can't just dip in and out. Which is probably why I procrastinate, because I know that immersive experience is going to take a lot out of me. But the cool thing is I am so happy. I am so fulfilled. I am loving it. This is sort of a reflection and reminder to you that writing the things you're most passionate about can be so fulfilling and a reward in and of itself. And that's it for my personal update. It went on a bit longer than I had intended, but hey, I was enjoying the moment, and hopefully you'll find something that you can reflect on and enjoy from me sharing that personal experience. But as that's it for now. I'll be back in just a few days at the end of the week with episode 450. Until then, here is that article, which is The Myth of Self-Publish It and They Will Come. And it is for your listening and reflective pleasure. Reflecting pleasure? Your reflective pleasure? See, I just messed up that nice transition. Oh well, what are you going to do? Let's roll the bumper and get on with this. Rejection to the left of me, rejection to the right. Stuck here in publishing with you. Part 2. The myth of upload your book and they will come. Why patience and persistence matter just as much for self-published authors. In part 1, I talked about the brutal math of traditional publishing, how a science fiction imprint might have only a handful of slots for new authors, while thousands of submissions flood in every month. I shared stories of writers who persisted through rejection after rejection until they broke through. And I emphasized that patience and persistence are two of the hallmarks of publishing success. But here's where some writers make a dangerous assumption. They think self-publishing is the escape hatch, the workaround, the way to bypass all those gatekeepers and finally get their book in front of readers. And technically, they're right. With a few clicks, anyone with access to the internet can publish an ebook to 190 countries overnight. But here's what nobody tells you at the upload screen. The slush pile didn't disappear. It just moved. It used to sit on the transoms of New York publishers, towering stacks of manila envelopes and query letters that editors had to wade through to find the occasional gem. That diamond in the rough that they would pluck from obscurity into publishing acclaim. Now that slush pile lives in an online catalog at a retailer near you. Amazon alone adds thousands of new titles every single day. And that's just one retailer. When you factor in Kobo, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Google Play, and the countless library and subscription platforms, we're talking about millions of books competing for reader attention. The gatekeepers didn't vanish. They moved from New York offices to homes around the world. Readers became the gatekeepers. But they're not the only gatekeepers. You see, the gatekeepers have also multiplied because in addition to the readers themselves, there are new ones too. And they're much harder to navigate than traditional publishing ever was. These gatekeepers are things like algorithms, also bought carousels, category rankings, and the ever-shifting sands of discoverability. So if you thought self-publishing meant you could skip patience and persistence, I have some difficult news. You need them more than ever. There are many myths when it comes to self-publishing, such as it being easy or something that happens overnight. One of the most persistent fantasies in indie publishing is that overnight success story. A writer who couldn't get any love from a publishing house in New York uploads a book. The book goes viral. The writer quits their day job and then buys a yacht and sails their way around the world. It happens. It does. I've seen it too. I personally know hundreds of writers who are earning 6- and 7-figure incomes from self-publishing. And based on the stats I've accessed over the years, I know there are likely several thousands of others out there earning that much. But it's still a very small percentage compared to all of the authors publishing. I wrote about the frightening reality of that realm a few weeks ago in my article, I Knew You. You're the writer who tried to write with passion. So I won't get into that again here. But yes, it does happen. But it happens very rarely. And it almost never happens the way people think it does. Let's look at Andy Weir. You probably know him as the author of The Martian, the book that became a blockbuster film starring Matt Damon. That book was a massive success story, the kind that makes other writers think, maybe that could happen to me. Or perhaps his 2021 novel Project Hail Mary, which has also been adapted into a movie that's coming in 2026. That one stars Ryan Gosling. But here's what a lot of people don't know about Andy Weir's overnight success. He worked as a software engineer for 25 years while writing in the margins of his life. After being laid off from AOL in 1999, he spent 3 years writing a novel and trying to land an agent. He returned to the tech industry and began writing as a fun and self-fulfilling hobby. During that time, he created a webcomic called Casey and Andy, and that built a modest following over 7 years. He followed that up with a short story called The Egg, and that saw moderate success and audience growth. Shortly after that science fiction story in 2009, remember, more than 10 years after he started to want to launch that dream of writing, he began posting chapters of a novel he was calling The Martian on his blog. He posted them for free, 1 chapter at a time. His readers loved it. They loved it so much they asked him to put it on Kindle so they could read it more easily. When he finally self-published it in 2011, he priced it at 99 cents, which was Amazon's minimum allowed price point, because he'd already given it away for free, and he felt weird charging more. Within 3 months, it had sold 35,000 copies and topped Amazon's science fiction bestseller list. Then came the movie option and the offers from the traditional publishing sphere. But let's do that math again. Andy Weir spent 25 years building toward that moment. Almost a full decade just cultivating the audience who would eventually ask him to publish the book. That's not an overnight success. That's patience and persistence in their purest form. Scott Sigler figured out something similar even earlier. He was one of the pioneers who learned success from giving a book away. In March 2005, Sigler became the first author to release a podcast-only novel, Earth Core, serialized as free audio episodes. Every week, like clockwork, he'd release another chapter. He did this for years, building a devoted fan base who called themselves Sigler junkies. He wasn't getting paid, he wasn't getting published, he was giving away his work for free to anyone who would listen. But he showed up every week, persistently. When his novel Ancestor finally hit Amazon, it debuted at #1 in horror and science fiction, and #2 overall, behind only Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Random House took notice and signed him to a 5-book deal. The breakthrough there looked sudden. The work behind it was anything but. Amanda Hawking's story is a brilliant example of persistence. She practically became a household name overnight in March 2011, when it was announced she had sold more than 1 million copies of her books and earned $2 million from sales. But it took her 19 years and 17 novels. I worked really hard at this for my entire life, Hawking has said. I was trying to get published for 9 years before I started selling books, and I've been writing literally since I could write. 9 years. Let that sink in. While working as a group home caretaker for people with disabilities, Hawking wrote 17 novels in her free time. She sent manuscripts to more than 50 literary agents. She got rejection after rejection, the standard form letters that every writer dreads. Then, in April 2010, at age 25, she decided to self-publish her paranormal romance novels as ebooks. Not because she had some grand marketing strategy, not because she'd cracked the code, but because she'd run out of traditional options and still believed in her stories. Thank goodness she didn't give up, because millions of readers benefited from those stories too. Within 12 months, she had sold over 1 million copies of her first 9 books and earned $2 million. She joined an elite club that included James Patterson, Stieg Larsson, and Nora Roberts, authors who had sold 1 million books on the Kindle. But here's what the headlines never mentioned. Those 9 books she sold 1 million copies of, they came from that stack of 17 novels she'd written while working full-time and collecting rejection letters for nearly a decade. The overnight success here was built on 9 years of persistence and 17 manuscripts that traditional publishing didn't want. Colleen Hoover's path looks different on the surface, but the same principles apply. In November 2011, she started writing her first novel with no intention of getting published. She just wanted to write a story. When she finished Slammed, she self-published it on Amazon in January 2012 so that her mother, who had just received a Kindle for Christmas, could read it. That's it. She uploaded a book so her mom could read it. 6 people bought it. Then 60. A few months later, influential book bloggers discovered it. Word of mouth kicked in. By August 2012, both Slammed and its sequel, Point of Retreat, had hit the New York Times ebook bestseller list. It sounds like a fairy tale, right? That accidental author who stumbled into success? Except here's what Colleen Hoover herself has shared. On a MySpace post from 2006, 5 years before she wrote Slammed, in which she writes that although she's certain she was born to write a book, she believes she never will. She'd researched the odds, looked at how hard it was to get published, and convinced herself it wasn't worth trying. 5 years of doubt, 5 years of not writing the book she felt she was born to write. And even after her initial success, the patience continued. Her 2016 novel, It Ends With Us, sold steadily, but modestly, for years. Then, in 2020 and 2021, Book Talk discovered her backlist. A book she'd published 5 years earlier suddenly started selling tens of thousands of copies in print per week. Today, Colleen Hoover has sold over 50 million books worldwide. She outsold the Bible in 2022, but it took years of building a backlist, connecting with readers, and, crucially, continuing to write and publish, even when the massive success hadn't arrived yet. And when her traditional publisher turned down her idea for Verity, a psychological thriller that was outside her usual genre, she wrote it anyway and self-published it independently. It became her highest-selling book ever. That's what persistence looks like when you believe in your work. Speaking of deciding to do it anyway, something similar happened with Bella Andre. One that might resonate with writers who've already tasted traditional publishing and found it wanting. For 7 years, Andre worked with major New York publishers, writing romance novels and holding on by her fingernails, as she describes it, to the mid-list. Her books were published, they sold, but they never broke out. By January 2010, things seemed to be looking up. She'd sold a romance trilogy at auction and had high hopes for the next 3-book installment. Then her editor called with devastating news. The publisher couldn't get approval to contract the new trilogy. After 7 years of trying to make it work in traditional publishing, she'd hit a wall. So, Andre pivoted. She taught herself how to format an ebook, which was a novelty at the time with almost no online instructions or help or support. She taught herself Photoshop to design her own covers, and then she did something that speaks directly to the importance of patronage. She wrote personal emails to every single reader who had ever contacted her during the previous 5 years. She drafted hundreds of individual emails, letting them know she had a new book available. That book became the first self-published title to hit the top 25 bestseller list at a major online retailer. But Andre didn't stop there. She'd noticed something important. She'd noticed that the authors who really broke out were the ones with long series. Authors, she observed, tend to pop somewhere between book 3 and book 5. So she committed to writing an 8-book series about 8 siblings, the Sullivans. She put her blinders on, ignored the noise, and wrote. By 2013, 5 Sullivan books appeared simultaneously on the New York Times and USA Today bestseller lists. Traditional publishers came calling, including Harlequin, who had rejected her a decade earlier. She signed a groundbreaking 7-figure print-only deal, retaining her ebook, foreign, and film rights. I still remember the afternoon when I was working at Kobo, at the helm of Kobo Writing Life, when Bella called to share the news. I believe I squealed in delight when she told me about the offer, because it was truly the best of both worlds. Today, Bella Andre has sold over 10 million books. But it took 7 years of mid-list frustration, a devastating rejection, and then years more of strategic self-publishing and connecting with her readers before she broke through. The very industry that had dropped her came back offering millions. That's what patience can look like. In 2020, Matt Dinniman did something remarkably similar to what Andy Weir had done, just on a different platform. Dinniman started posting Dungeon Crawler Carl on Royal Road, a platform for web fiction where readers can follow stories chapter by chapter. He built an audience there before self-publishing on Amazon in October 2020. Today, the series has sold over 3 million copies. It became a New York Times bestseller. Penguin Random House acquired print rights through Ace Books, though Dinniman, smartly, retained his ebook rights and continues to self-publish digitally. Universal International Studios is developing a live-action TV adaptation with Seth MacFarlane's production company. 3 million copies, a TV deal, but it started with free chapters on a web fiction platform. It started with patiently building readers one at a time. And then there's the idea of keeping your options open, like with Hugh Howey, who self-published 9 books before the 10th one, Wool, started to take off. Traditional publishers came calling with 6- and 7-figure offers. Howey turned them all down. He didn't do this because he was anti-traditional publishing. He did it because none of the offers that came in let him keep his digital rights. He understood that his ebook sales were the engine driving his success, and he wasn't about to hand control of that over to anyone. Eventually, Simon & Schuster offered a print-only deal that let him retain his digital rights. That's the deal he took. He has spent most of the past decade sailing a yacht around the world, by the way. See? I told you it can happen. It's just rare. The Apple TV Plus show Silo, based on Howie's Wool series of novels, has gone through 2 seasons and was renewed for 2 additional ones as of December 2024. Howie's persistence wasn't just about writing and publishing. It was about waiting for the right deal, even when enormous sums of money were on the table in front of him. That takes a different kind of patience. The patience to know your worth and hold out for terms that serve your long-term career. But here's the uncomfortable truth about self-publishing. Getting your book published is the easy part. Getting it discovered and by the right readers is where the real work begins. Remember that slush pile I mentioned? The one that moved from publisher transoms to online retail catalogs? When your book goes live, it doesn't land on an editor's desk where a human being will evaluate it. It lands in a vast digital ocean along millions of other titles, and the only way readers are going to find it is if you help them. Yeah, I know. You already did all this hard work writing, and then finding the right editor and cover designer and making it the best book you possibly could. But the work doesn't end there. There are more mountains to climb. This is where 2 more of my 7 Ps become essential: promotion and patronage. Promotion isn't about shouting "buy my book" into the void. It's about experimentation. It's about finding the readers who are already looking for books like yours and putting your work in front of them. That might mean targeting advertising on Amazon or Facebook and taking courses and learning how to create effective ads instead of just ads that give those 2 giant corporations your hard-earned money. It likely means building a newsletter list of people who are interested in you. Because otherwise, how do you stay in touch with your readers? None of the major retailers out there let people know who is buying your book or giving you a way to contact them. So creating an author newsletter and offering them a reason to want to hear about your next releases is a significant tool you can leverage. It might also mean podcast appearances, blog tours, in-person events, virtual events, and engaging in social media communities in a creative storytelling way rather than just posting the annoying and boring equivalent of buy my book content. It might mean writing in a series and using the first book as a gateway drug for readers. It might mean running price promotions through various newsletters such as BookBub and Bargain Booksy, experimenting with the page reads of Kindle Unlimited by being exclusive to Amazon, or choosing wide ebook distribution through platforms like Draft2Digital and finding success on numerous retailers and via the library systems. Amanda Hawking ran something she called Zombie Palooza in October 2010. 31 days of content, guest posts, giveaways, and short stories on her blog. It was, by her own admission, incredibly stressful, but her sales went from 3,000 to 5,000 copies per month to 100,000 copies in December alone. Bella Andre sent hundreds of personal emails to readers she connected with over 5 years. That personal touch helped launch her self-publishing career. Colleen Hoover built a Facebook group for her fans, the Cohorts, that now has over 129,000 members. Years of genuine connection meant that when Book Talk discovered her backlist, there was already a passionate community ready to amplify it. The truth is, what works for one author might not work for another. What works in one genre might flop in a different one. What worked last year might not work today. So promotion involves its own form of persistence. Trying things, measuring results, adjusting, and trying again. And patronage? That's about the readers themselves. Not just finding them, but keeping them. Building a relationship and keeping them nourished. Giving them a reason to come back for the next book and the one after that. Andy Weir didn't just have 3,000 blog followers. He had 3,000 people who cared about his work enough to ask him to publish it. Scott Sigler didn't just have podcast listeners. He had Sigler junkies who evangelized his books to everyone they knew. Matt Dinneman didn't just have Royal Road readers. He had fans who followed him from free web fiction to paid Kindle books to audiobooks to hardcovers. That's patronage. readers who become advocates. An audience that grows not because of any single promotion, but because the work resonates and people tell each other about it. And because the author takes the time to curate a community. Building that takes time, often years. Which brings us back to patience. Because the long game is still long, really long. Let me share some numbers that might really recalibrate your expectations. According to a recent survey published by Written Word Media, the creators of the promo newsletters, Bargain Booksy and Free Booksy and others, and it should be noted that this honor-based survey that included 1,346 authors likely includes mostly authors who are already investing in marketing for their books. So I'd put them in the more savvy/successful class of indie authors. 44% of them earn less than $100 a month. 56% of them earn over $100 a month. And 13% of them earn more than $5,000 a month. Only 8% of them earn more than $10,000. Again, let me remind you that these stats are from authors who likely already have done a lot of work. Based on sales stats I've tracked over the years, I know those are already successful authors. That's just the reality of the market. Here's some stats that demonstrate the long game. Authors with 1 to 3 books, about 80% of them fall into the under $100 a month bracket. Authors with more than 10 books, their income begins to ramp up steeply. Authors with more than 25 books, their median income is about $3,000 a month, and 40% of those authors earn more than $5,000 a month. The survey itself states that one of the strongest predictors of earning potential in indie publishing continues to be catalog size. And according to traditional industry surveys, of the authors who eventually earn $100,000 or more per year from their writing, 48% took 3 to 5 years to get there. Another 32% took 5 to 10 years. And 7% took more than a decade. The writers who hit those numbers aren't the ones who uploaded one book, saw modest sales, and gave up. They're the ones who kept publishing, who built backlists, who learned what worked and did more of it, who treated their writing career like a long-term investment rather than a lottery ticket. Bella Andre noticed that authors pop around book 5. She committed to an 8-book series. Amanda Hawking had 9 books ready to go when she started self-publishing because she'd spent years writing them while collecting rejections. Colleen Hoover's biggest success came from a book published 5 years earlier that readers rediscovered. They persisted. If you're considering self-publishing or you've already started and you're wondering why the readers aren't showing up, here's what I want you to understand. The path is different from traditional publishing, but the fundamentals are the same. You still need patience because building an audience takes time, because discoverability doesn't happen overnight, because the algorithms reward consistency and backlist depth in ways that favor the long game. You still need persistence, because your first book probably won't be your breakthrough, because the promotion strategies you try first might not work, because you'll need to keep writing, keep publishing, keep experimenting, keep showing up. You need promotion because in a world of millions of books, no one will find yours by accident. You have to help readers discover you, and that means learning a whole new set of skills that have nothing to do with writing. And you need patronage because individual sales matter less than loyal readers. The authors who thrive are the ones who build genuine connections with their audience, who deliver consistently, who treat readers as partners in their creative journey. Self-publishing isn't an escape from the hard realities of the book business. It's a different door into the same room. The room where success is built on years of work, where most of the overnight sensations you hear about have a decade of invisible effort behind them, where the writers who make it are typically the ones who refuse to quit. Andy Weir worked for 25 years before The Martian changed his life. Scott Sigler gave away free podcast episodes every week for years before Random House came knocking. Amanda Hawking wrote 17 novels while working full-time and collecting rejections for 9 years before selling 1 million copies. Colleen Hoover spent 5 years doubting she'd ever write a book, then watched her biggest success come from a novel published half a decade earlier. Bella Andre spent 7 years in the midlist before being dropped, then rebuilt her career into a 7-figure deal with the same industry that had let her go. Matt Dinniman built his audience on a free web fiction platform before selling 3 million books. Hugh Howey had the patience to turn down huge offers until he got the deal that was right for him. Their paths were different, but patience and persistence were woven through every one of them. I've spent more than 30 years watching this industry evolve. From the days when self-publishing meant vanity presses and stigma. Heck, I even hid the fact that my first book released in 2004 was self-published. To today's landscape, where indie authors regularly outsell traditional mid-listers and occasionally break into the biggest bestseller lists in the world. The tools have changed. The opportunities have expanded. But the fundamentals haven't moved an inch. Write the best book you can. Put it in front of readers. Learn what works for you, for your book, for your readers, and keep going. The slush pile may have moved online, but the way out of it is the same as it ever was. Don't give up. Be patient. Persist. Keep learning. Keep growing. Keep experimenting. Keep progressing. The only writers who truly fail are the ones who stop.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.